everybody, and welcome to The Seventh Rule with Sirach Lofton.
Hello, hello.
My name is Ryan T. Husk, and today we're doing a review of the 455's Star Trek documentary, Chaos on the Bridge, which features especially the first two seasons of Star Trek The Next Generation. It's an incredible documentary, and right now with us, we have executive producer David Zappone joining us. We also have the assistant to the EP and head writer, Lolita Fajo, joining us.
Hello.
Of the series, Ryan, of TNG, not of Chaos, right?
Very true. So Dave Zappone, executive producer of 455 Films, which created this, and many other documentaries like the upcoming Voyager documentary, What We Left Behind, The Captains and the Captain's Close-Ups, For the Love of Spock.
We can announce Lolita, why don't you talk about what we're doing now?
Yes, we're actually doing a documentary now on the wonderful, famous Michael. I'm sorry, you guys. The doorbell just rang. Can I pause it? Can I hit?
Yeah, sure.
It's going to get a plug-in for crying out loud. You edit this, right, Ryan?
Yeah, now.
Okay. Good.
Yeah, no.
I know.
Yeah, we'll get into it.
I'm just so jealous that you guys got to see it for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
Well, at the right time too, I think. Actually,
yeah. So definitely for you guys.
For us, for me, it's the right time because of the timing of it. I'm glad that Ryan suggested this because it seems to be perfectly placed for where we are and where we're trying to go. And that's really where I'm going to start, getting into the questions, because what a great idea and just great execution.
Yeah,
but
well, it was my idea 100%. But Bill, to his credit, boy, once he, I'll save it.
Yeah,
we'll save it. But another,
he dove into it, Sirach. There was no BS there.
Tell.
Like when he spoke to Avery, when he has something he's interested in.
He's a very good conversationalist. He just knows how to extract stuff out of people. People let their guard down a little bit. He asks very direct questions. I mean, he should have his own podcast.
Yeah,
I'd like to watch his podcast.
Like he has a free minute.
Yeah, really.
As if he needs to do anything else. But but he's just But he's just naturally gifted at interviewing people and asking questions and talking. So that was another thing that just popped out.
You want to jump in, Ryan?
Yeah. Well, let's get back to. Since we're given stuff that's great for the recording, so anyway, we'll jump back in, and Lolita, you can just say what you're going to say about the documentary.
And so 455, we're currently in production right now on a documentary about the great Michael Westmore, famous makeup man, who of course worked on Star Trek for 17, 18 years. But his whole family history is amazing, goes back a century in Hollywood. So stay tuned for that.
Yeah, there was a time in Hollywood where every major studio makeup department was run by a Westmore.
Right.
And we've I can leak one name. We've already got Sylvester Stallone in it.
Wow. Really?
Yeah, because Michael did Rocky and Rambo.
Yeah.
Well, we'll definitely have to cover that sometime soon as well. Yeah. So let's just get into Chaos on the Bridge. For Sirach and myself, it's perfect timing because we just finished season 2 of Star Trek The Next Generation. So we're jumping into this. And we've had so many questions about why did this happen? Why was this out of order? What's up with the writing? Everything's so weird and confusing. This documentary explains it. And Dave, can you explain to us where the genesis of this idea came from?
Well, the genesis was Bill and I had such a tremendous working relationship dating back to the Captains. So that started in 2010. So we do the Captains. I see, wow, Shatner is an incredible interview. And then we jump to Get a Life about the Star Trek conventions. Then we did 6 episodes spin-off of the Captains, including an hour on just Christopher Plummer and all the individual captains. So Bill and I had done a lot. And so I said, I was such a fan of Next Generation. Now he knows them and he had seen it, but he certainly was not a fan. And I just pitched it once in his office. He said, "No, I've done enough Star Trek, forget it." And with Bill, I know you just don't give up. And then I got him in a really good mood when he was doing a horse competition at the Equestrian Center. I pitched it again without a hesitation. Just said, "Yeah, let's do it." And the whole concept was exactly what I think you guys have probably seen. Why the heck was the show so uneven the first 2 seasons, and then once you hit 3, you're off? So that was always our thesis. We wanted to answer that question, and we never intended, which we didn't, to go past season 3.
Well, first of all, I want to commend you because I think you did a great job of giving us a real overall view of what was happening from so many different angles and perspectives. You got the studio executives on one side, you've got the creative people on the other side, and really just so many people from Rick Berman, Maurice Hurley, to John Pike, and all of these people that gave some great insight. And I thought DC Fontana, everybody really gave us some exceptional interview and insight into those first 2 seasons. And now, having watched those first 2 seasons, it was chaotic. I mean, you just see that
Totally.
Denise Crosby just boom, she's gone all of a sudden. Then they bring in a new doctor, and then their episodes don't seem to have continuity. There's some kind of issues there where you're like, well, where did this come from? And so there's a lot of things that are actually visible on screen when you're watching this stuff. Why is the second season 22 episodes, for example, as opposed to the 26 that the first season was? So there were so many things and questions that I believe you answered for the audience. But I want to just go a little bit further into the first question, which was convincing William Shatner, because there was a little moment in this documentary where Ira asked William Shatner,
Yeah.
like, he says, well, honestly, what did you think about it when you first heard that they were going to do this new Star Trek show? And I thought that was very telling because he felt a certain type of way about it. I think he used the word twinged. I twinged.
Yeah.
And and I think that would be anybody's response when they hear about something that they created. It's their baby, and then they're not part of the reboot of it. So was there some conversation there about his original twinging that you kind of felt like was a reason why he didn't want to do it initially?
No, I think it was really more that he really was a little burned out on Star Trek. And I think he was afraid that he just didn't know enough about the series. But Bill being Bill, once he dives into a topic, he is off. And I think where it really turned was, I think it was with John Pike, where Bill comes to the conclusion that it's a poker game, that poker is being played, and everybody is jockeying for power. And then we had our theme. And Sirach, once he hit, and that's not me telling him, that's him. And then we ended up developing a whole even artistic motif and musical motif around that game of poker that was constantly being played. So I think the other thing that helped, our first round of interviews are the ones you see at JPL, Jet Propulsion Labs, where you could see all the Gene Roddenberry on the screens. They actually let us film in Mission Control for that. And Maury Hurley was the first interview. So Bill loves Maury because Maury produced Lolita, what was Tech War? Didn't Bill do a show? You might not remember.
Yeah,
anyway,
I can't think of the name, but they
worked together, so that he was like pulled in right away from Maury. And what I felt really good is then it rekindled their friendship. They hadn't seen each other in 20 years. And Maury started coming to Monday Night Football and watching, and they became friends again. And Lolita, you'll get a kick out of this. Maury was like, how tall was Maury? He had to be 6'2" when I knew him. And he would literally back me into the refrigerator at Bill's kitchen and get right in my face and say, how's the edit going? Where are you? And the flop sweat, when I just doesn't often happen to me, but more, and he wasn't trying to be mean. He was just an intimidating guy.
Yes, very much. But also he had the sweetest heart as well.
Mhm.
Just a really nice man, but tough.
Yeah,
Well,
I was
Lolita-
really happy to see a face on the name because I was so much involved with all of this stuff, and we always see Maurice Hurley's name, and I was just really happy to kind of get a sense of his personality and you know, his voice, actually, to hear how he thought and how he rationalized things. I thought that was another insight there. I'm sorry, go ahead, Ryan.
We were going to call the film, but the network wouldn't let us. We financed this through Canadian funding and HBO Canada. Bill wanted to call the whole film Wacky Doodle, which is what Maury calls the situation in the writer's room.
And
the
songs.
Yeah, and then the ending song, Steve Rankin, by the way, who you guys probably know, played on that.
Yeah, I noticed that. That was really interesting. And Lolita, Sirach and I are watching this documentary with fresh eyes. We've never seen it before. Dave has just rewatched the documentary. He has seen it before, I'm guessing, since he produced the thing. You are watching it for the first time, and you've got that unique point of view of you lived it.
I did.
What did this feel like from somebody that actually lived behind the scenes and saw some of the bedlam? You experienced other bedlam that was not covered. What was just the overall experience of watching this?
Well, first of all, yeah, I thought I had seen it, and I don't think I ever saw it in full. And I was mesmerized last night. I wanted to watch it again, and so I watched it the first time, and then I fast forwarded and watched other pieces a second or third time. It just made me feel so great to go back that many years and see those people, especially Maurice Hurley and a lot of them. And because I was hired during the chaos of going from that first season to the second season, coming out of the writer's strike and going into production. And it was crazy. And the whole Leonard Maislich thing was
I was going to ask you, did you see this man?
Oh, absolutely. Creeping around all the time. And, we have to stay sometimes late at night because of scripts that were always late, as usual. And he would always be like there creeping around. And I found it very interesting. Dave, I remember you saying you could never find a picture of him. We never saw.
I actually have a story on that. We did find one photo, and I contacted his son, who's an attorney, and he said to Bill and I called him. I forget his first name. And he said, yes, you can use the picture as long as there is nothing negative about my father in the film. So Bill and I said, well, there's the picture.
I got that. Really
all right.
But
there really aren't any pictures. And Eddie Milkis either, we couldn't, which was surprising. Because Eddie was in post-production going back to like Odd Couple and Happy Days. But we could not find a picture of Eddie Milkis.
Yeah, but for me, it was really a trip down memory lane, first of all. Yeah. And, Gene was chaotic and he was wackadoodle and everything, but his heart, again, was just in such a great place most of the time. So for me, it was a really great trip down memory lane, but every single thing that everybody said was true. That place was a nut house. I mean, and I could tell stories, but that'll take time.
Well, I wanted you to attest to some of this stuff because they've talked about having scripts and production meetings and ready to go. And then like, boom, 3 or 4 days before you're about to shoot, he rips up the whole thing, says start from scratch. So that must be like a crazy. And
the revolving door, that billboard that Ron Moore had in his toilet, in his bathroom, that thing was fantastic because there was probably a good 30 people that went through that door in those first 2 years. It was crazy. It was crazy. And the writing staff was not cohesive at all. We had Bert Armus there, the skin of evil, who killed Tasha Yar. Bert was a cop. Kojak was based on Bert Armus. The reason Bert was brought in was because he and Maury Hurley had this long history of working together on cop shows. Bert didn't really belong there, but he was talented enough. And just all these people coming and going. And I saw that on one of the pictures, that gal named Sherry Goodhart's was on staff with Ira and Ron and Snodgrass. I haven't thought of her in years. I wonder what happened to her. But she was there during that chaos and probably one of those revolving doors out. But yeah, it was until Michael Pillar and Jerry Taylor came, it was definitely what you captured in this film. Absolutely.
Good.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Good. And you know,
I thought it was riveting. I really enjoyed every moment of this documentary,
thank you,
David. So I
Scott.
want to congratulate you on just putting together. And also, when you're doing something like this, and you get these interviews, and you know, Shatner says, "Oh, that's like poker," and he kind of asks, Pike about it, John Pike about, "Hey, you were playing poker in that situation." Um, then you go back and you start to come up with the idea of doing the animation and kind of visualizing these things. So the story, you don't know what you're going to get until you get it, and then you kind of reverse on that, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's true with any documentary. All you can have is your thesis, your what you think your through line will be. I mean, again, look at what happened when we went for the captains to Avery's. Would you in a million years think Bill Shatner and Avery Brooks would be sitting and singing at a piano? No way. No way. So you can't predict that. But one interesting thing I'll tell you, which I think I've revealed before, is Patrick Stewart turned us down initially. He did not want to do the film. He politely said to Bill, "I'm just not interested." And then Bill and I were in New York City, and Patrick was appearing on Broadway in New York City. We had gone to see like Howard Stern or something. And he called Patrick again and told Patrick what John Pike said about him.
Nice.
The whole story where he showed up at the commissary in uniform, and Patrick said, "All right, that's it. I do want to rebut. And I'll give you 5 minutes." And so Bill couldn't do it, so I had to do it. So I did that interview. Patrick and I, we were friendly from the captains. He said, "I could give you 5 minutes, David. Ian McKellen and I are about to open next door in Broadway." It's like 6:05. We talked for 45 minutes, and I had to stop him and said, "Patrick, you're going to miss your curtain." And he's such a gentleman. He brought me over to the box office and got me tickets for the show.
Wow.
That's Patrick. But Joe can speak more when we speak with Joe, the editor. So we had basically the film put together. And at the 11th hour, we get this great Patrick Stewart interview. So everything changes.
Yeah, that's the beauty of documentaries, though, I've learned over the last few years, which I knew nothing about, obviously, until Dave graciously brought me on board. But yeah, it's fascinating. You just don't know what you're going to get from somebody in a sitting.
They take a life of their own.
Absolutely.
You follow
Patrick answered every question I had.
Mm-hmm.
And I never looked at my list. We just connected.
Dave,
Wow.
Go ahead, Ryan.
I was just going to say, Dave, was there one that got away? I mean, I'm sure there are a lot of people you would have liked to have interviewed, but that you couldn't. But is there one or maybe two that above all you said, "I just wish I could have explored that angle a little bit more with this particular person"?
Ironically, Lucy Salhaney, who was the genius, the woman that came up with the idea at Paramount to do the syndication, we couldn't find her, but we found her for Voyager, and she's in Voyager. And it would have been great to get like a little more of Dorn and Spiner, but they really don't do documentaries. So I think we had enough of the cast. I think the real get was Diana Muldaur.
Mm-hmm.
We got really lucky with her. Denise was terrific. We have Frakes, we have Sir Patrick, we have Michael, we have Gates. So we did okay.
I think obviously who's missing, but there's nothing to have been done. It would have been great to have Michael Pillar to
absolutely.
Because he came in when it was still chaos, but he tied a bow and it went from there.
And again, not to plug another one of our documentaries, but in Voyager we have Sean Pillar, his son, and Sandra Pillar, his widow,
and Jerry Taylor as well. Yep. Her presence was a little missed, but it certainly didn't hurt this documentary. It was wonderful. Really, it gave me chills last night watching it. I was so impressed. And I love the animation. Just fantastic.
Joe will talk about that. But the other thing is that what really frustrated Bill and I, and Joe as an editor, Canada they would not let us make this a full-length documentary. They It's 58 minutes, I think, is in total. We had to squeeze so much in. The one complaint we do get is that it hits too fast because there's so much packed in. We had more than enough for a 90-minute documentary. And that's the beauty of the Captain's Collection, which I'll plug, which is all of my Shatner docs, including Chaos, including the full Patrick Stewart, the full Maury Hurley interview. Essentially, every documentary I named on one Blu-ray box set. It's available on Amazon and Shout Factory. So I highly recommend that, because I think Joe and I put the feature of Chaos is almost an hour. We put about another 90 minutes of behind the scenes.
Really?
Yep.
Yeah. There was so much stuff in this documentary. The fact that you got Katzenberg and Les Moonves, I really thought those were also great, source information, direct source information.
Yeah.
From the top guys.
Sirocco got those in a day. Bill and I, we went to DreamWorks first and then over to CBS Radford for Les Moonves. And Les notoriously allegedly was not much of a Star Trek fan. So that's why you don't really see very much of him. But Jeff Katzenberg was great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you got him. And I learned so much from
That's
this.
all Bill. That's not me. That's Bill.
It's the collective effort of all of you guys determined to make this thing happen. And I thought that you guys really hit the nail on the head. There was so much stuff that flew by. The Patrick Stewart audition with the toupee, I thought was it was gold. And to hear some of the other people that they were considering, the Mitch Ryan, Roy Fiennes, Yaphet Kotto, this is also gemstones of information. I mean, you could just have a whole extra segment just on that alone. Also, I thought it was great to hear about Lucy Saul-Haney and how her creativity coming up with the first run syndication type hybrid show was instrumental in making this whole thing happen. So that's very clever on her part. And I also thought it was fantastic to know that, again, a woman named Lucy saves the Star Trek franchise.
Yeah,
so this is twice now.
Yes, it's historic.
Rock, you owe her a little bit too. I think you know a little bit about first run syndication.
I do. So shout out to Lucy Saul-Haney. I love Lucy in my notes here. But there's just the extra information about Gene's mindset. You mentioned Isaac Asimov came up in here, and the whole humanistic type of movement that was created behind that, and just a little insight onto the ideals that Gene was really sticking towards, and also the evolution of him as a person from being more of the playboy, getting all the girls type, mindset that he had in his younger age, and then more this kind of, more like Picard in this cerebral type of, standing for principle. And I really like the evolution there that was talked about as well. So I just felt like this gave me so much. The Susan Sackett information. I mean, the Captain Hornblower novel.
That was
suggestion
cool
to read that book. I just thought you gave us a million things, and this was fantastic and so well done.
Thanks.
Yeah, and I also like the fact that you didn't shy away from when Susan was talking about and Richard Arnold was talking about Gene's drinking and drug use. That you put it out there because we all knew it was going on there, but the public didn't necessarily know that. So I was glad that you didn't shy away from talking about that. Because,
but I hope what came through, and was my struggle in the editing room, and Joel talked about it, is trying to balance. I did not want to vilify Gene Roddenberry in any way.
Of course not, but you didn't.
No.
Yeah, so that's what we really were very conscious. And that's why the Patrick interviews helped so much too, is because he really liked Gene. Yeah. And that comes through. So yeah, I did not want this to be, let's trash.
Like a tell-all about his life.
If it weren't for Gene, I wouldn't have a career.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, we all owe a debt of gratitude to Gene. I mean,
yeah,
all of us. So I definitely, with certain kinds of genius comes like a certain kind of, not normal behavior, I would say. And some,
Madness.
yeah,
Genius.
right?
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and so he was sticking to his guns about certain principles that he thought defined this utopian future. Based on these certain set of principles, which I feel like he did accomplish, and that becomes the underlying legacy of what Star Trek really means, is this idea of this future in which we're all trying to um, coexist, explore, and uplift um, life forms that we interact with. So uh, I really thought this was just so much information, and I wanted to say also, or back to your point about Michael Piller, I didn't realize how instrumental Michael Piller was to being, let's say, the calm on the bridge. Um, and also this gave me a lot more insight into the roles that Rick Berman played um, during those times as well,
Hmm.
kind of trying to mediate and manage so many egos, because it seemed like there was ego on the side of the studios, there was ego on the side of the production, there was a lot of egos going around. And Maurice Hurley comes off of Miami Vice, which is not like a small show. It's like,
Mhm.
And the
so,
Equalizer, both
and
at
the
the same
Equalizer.
time.
Yeah, so this is
Mhm.
like everybody's coming with a certain level of cachet, and their own background and experience, and it may not directly translate into Star Trek, which Gene has authority over, but still they have great ideas. They are skilled at writing.
Hmm.
They have these their own personal background and experience. And I mean, Lolita, when you're in the middle of uh, this storm as it was going around you, was there a sense that it would eventually calm down and that the dust would settle soon, or did it feel like on edge all the time?
It was on edge all the time. And as great of a man as Maury was and as talented, that chaos wasn't going to go away until he left. It just, there were too
Mm.
many egos involved and too many power struggles, and just not anybody truly at that point running the writing room. The heart building was in chaos. And it really wasn't until Michael Piller came that there was this, literally, you could feel this kind of calming thing coming. Now you have to remember, Maury Hurley left, then another guy named Michael Wagner came, which wasn't mentioned in this film, which is fine, but he lasted all of 6 weeks, I think, maybe.
We didn't mention him. We mentioned him, but not by name. You're right.
Oh, okay.
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
then when Michael Piller came, and then he started bringing in some of
and
these
and
kids.
Ira, right? Because Ira was
Ira.
really was in the room.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Michael
Mhm.
came in above Ira, but thank God Ira was there. And
Yeah.
then once Richard Manning and Hans Beimler and the young Ron Moore came in, things started to kind of go, oh, you could feel it. And it wasn't as chaotic. Where's that script coming from? What's scene 4 going to be? And blah, blah, blah. And you also have to remember this, at this time, the writers were not using computers,
Right.
which made this whole chaotic thing
That's
even more
nuts.
insane. So Ira Bear would give me a long legal yellow pad of chicken scratch as a script. And that's initially what I was hired as, to do that initially. It didn't last long.
Mhm.
And finally, they got the writers on to computers. But yeah, so there was just a lot of chaos. And that whole thing I thought was fascinating watching, because by the time I got there in the second season, David Gerald was gone, DC was gone, but I knew about all of that, of course. But for me to hear their stories last night again, which I've heard over the years, was really interesting. And they
Mhm.
must have just felt so screwed, really.
And
They
it's really important, everybody at home, for you to know where you can find this documentary. You can get it at shoutfactory.com. They've got a ton of great stuff, including more content that Dave and 455 Films have created. Or you can just go check it out at Amazon.com. You may have heard of that one as well. It's available right here. It's an amazing collection. It's got tons of extended footage and extended interviews. It's got way more. Get it, because by the way, it makes a great gift. You can get it for anybody that you care about or want to convince them that you care about them, or you can get it for yourself because you care about yourself and you've earned it. But we're going to take a super quick break, everybody, and we will be right back with way more coverage of this documentary and the first 2 seasons of Star Trek: The Next Generation. We'll be right back on The Seventh Rule. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to The Seventh Rule with Cirroc Lofton.
Hello.
And of course, executive producer David Zappone. We've got Lolita Fajot returning as well. We've got editor Joe Kornbrook here as well. This is going to be a lot of fun. First and foremost, Lolita and I were talking about watching this documentary before we were recording today. And we were talking about how we could not put this documentary down. I wanted to just watch some of it last night just to get a taste. Next thing I know, it's 1 a.m. I'm not turning it off. I kept saying, okay, just 5 more minutes. And I could not put it down because it's got this frenetic pace, but it's so much information. And obviously you had these constraints where you had to keep it within an hour. We know that now, but otherwise I was like, it's what
more. I want more. I want more.
I couldn't
didn't
handle anymore. It was so much good stuff. But Joe, can you talk a little bit about the editing and the difficulties of cramming so much good information into 58 minutes?
Well, they're first of all, got to give credit to Bill Shatner, because it really was his mandate that it had to be like this.
Yeah.
And I come from a trailer editing world, and so I was like, oh yeah, I can do that. I know how to make things fast and quick. It was a little too quick for me. The first 20 minutes, there's so much in it because we had to cover, Gene, the original series and what happened to him over the next decade and a half to get in the movie, and the kind of the train wreck that movie was. I mean, a lot of people love the Star Trek, the motion picture, but it was fraught in production. So you had to get into that, and then after that, Nick Meyer really resurrected this hit franchise with Wrath of Khan, and then Paramount said, "Hey, we got our own. We have this thing here that we can make, that we can put out on television," and and so we had to get all those things in there, and then it's a redemption story for Gene, who kind of wandered in the desert, as was the metaphor that was used. And, that was all in the first 20 minutes. Mm-hmm. And when we were editing the film, we had so much. And I remember looking over at Kevin and Dave and going, guys, at one point we were like, I got 45 minutes of this, and we've got, we only got an hour, and we got all this other stuff we got to get to. How are we going to do this? So that was a head scratcher. And I have to say my official credit, because this was a Canadian production, is I'm an associate producer. Any editing duties that I did were as an associate producer. That's for Dave and my
it's for
indemnity.
Understood.
So absolutely.
And kudos to Kevin Lane for doing a beautiful job shooting it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and Kevin actually, Kevin, we were sort of two camps in making this film. I had Kevin was editing with his wife Helene, and Dave and I were editing. And then at one point, Kevin took everything and went off for about 3 months, and we didn't see anything, and then came back. And then Dave and I took another pass at what Kevin and Helene had done. And
then we had Decibel in Canada.
Yeah.
Credited.
Yeah. Credited, yes. And you know, he was instrumental in the post-production process. Not as much in the storytelling, but yeah, it was. But you know what? Through Decibel, we got Aurelian, who was the artist who did all the sketches and the 3D stuff, the animations that really added to the film. You know,
Oh
it
my
really
goodness.
kind of
Ask about that.
Well, I'll tell you how that came about, and Joe will talk about the execution. But Joe, you remember you and I talking. We couldn't get Paramount at that time wouldn't license us any footage, and there really wasn't any footage of behind the scenes. So I'm scratching my head. And Joe, what was the doc? I think it was.
Well, there were
watched
two.
We both
and I watched the Bo Jackson 30 for 30 doc.
Yep.
And you watched the David
Clive
Geffen.
Davis. Yeah, I thought it was Clive Davis.
I think Clive Davis came later. I thought it was David Geffen.
Oh, Geffen, you're right. It was Geffen.
Yeah.
So Joe and I concurrently came up with the idea, let's animate.
Yeah. And there had also been a Morton Downey Jr. documentary that was really good, that had a lot of animation in it. That kind of opened. Yeah. That was those and The Kid Stays in the Picture. They were all doing really innovative things. And of course, we didn't have the budget to do quite as much of like the separation that those guys did, but you know, those other projects did. But those were all inspirations of ways to try and make something that happened so long ago that there was no actual footage of, and give it life. So
I felt it. I thought that it did give it life. There were many times, I mean, specifically with the auditioning scene with Patrick Stewart, I thought they gave it so much more life. Seeing the wig in his hand and being flown across the
FedEx across the pond.
That's really right.
Yeah.
That's great.
How about Leonard Maislis getting pushed out the window?
Well, that was brilliant. Just brilliant.
I love the sheer glee that Bill has as he's prodding David Gerald to like, give me more, David.
Say that again.
Give me more.
Say that again.
Bill actually does this. Remember, he does the
he's
clap.
like,
yeah.
I just
definitely love that. He loved that story a lot. But yeah, I just thought there was so many moments there, and I wanted to ask you: do you feel that a lot of the chaos was happening because it was so much of the old guard of the original series of Star Trek, kind of having to have it wrestled out of their hand by the newer generation of people that were coming along?
Do you mind if I take this, Dave?
Not at all. No, go.
Yeah, I think that, you know, Gene had done a show with, you know, he'd done a lot of television, but times had changed. And he brought the two people that he felt most comfortable with who were there, which was David and DC. And
Bob Justin.
And Bob Justin.
Right.
But, you know, DC is, you know, is a great mind writer. I have a lot of respect for her, but I don't know that. I know that her and David worked in the 70s, but they were doing things like the Space Nuts. You remember it was the Bob Denver? You know, they were doing those kind of things. So they weren't really doing prime time television, to my knowledge. They were more, you know, they worked on the animated series and they did all these things. So they had, they're good writers, but I don't know that they were able to hit the demands of a network show in the time frames that they had. And Gene kept changing. He would write a new script and that, you know, so there were some issues that I'm sure that's when Rick Berman probably had, because at that early on he was representing the studio and he kind of had to take some charge behind the scenes, and so they brought in a lot of different writers. I mean, you were there, Lo. So
yeah, I was just going to say, I think part of the problem was those DC and David, they weren't showrunners. That show lacked a showrunner, especially the first season. I'm amazed. I wasn't there then, but I'm amazed that anything got done. But coming into that second season, when you finally did have a showrunner, Maurice Hurley, even with all the conflict and the chaos that was still going on, at least you had someone that was here. You know, and then Ira was here and everybody else. But that first season, it must have just been insane because no one took charge. There was no one in charge really, in the writing department.
Lolita, did you ever work with Bob Justman? or was
A
he
little
gone?
bit, just a little tiny bit. A lot of those people were kind of like still had their offices there, and I think they were kind of hoping that they might still get brought back in that second season, but obviously that didn't happen.
Yeah.
So, and then like I was saying earlier, but then there was Leonard all the time poking around. Really creepy.
I think too, probably the people that Gene brought in, they were always deferential to Gene, and somebody had to be the responsible person running, making sure that the show got made in the time that it needed to get made.
And challenging Gene and not just saying yes, 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 yes.
Yeah, yeah.
So one of my favorite moments in the documentary is when Jonathan Frakes says, I was in one of those little honey those little metal things, those little tiny trailers. And he says, you remember those? And Shatner says, yeah, I used to see them across.
Classic
across.
Bill.
Yeah.
That was great.
Perfect class. It was just such a great moment. Diana Muldaur, though, where was that interview conducted? And I also felt like she almost felt like she had more of a connection to Bill in that interview, because she kind of, was suggesting like, no, when we did it with you guys, it was the right way. And these guys,
was great.
They didn't. Yeah, I thought
we got that in Vegas.
We shot that was in the same room that you were interviewed, Sirach, for the captain's close-up when we followed up.
Mm-hmm. I did notice very special thanks to everybody at Creation Entertainment. They've been great.
Those guys have been
films.
Yeah,
they have been great. Adam, Gary, we're all working on a new project.
Stephanie, yeah, we've filmed so much of our interviews at Creation events. Just over a decade. Well over a decade.
And Lolita's only made that connection for us stronger. And then don't forget, we did an entire documentary about Creation, essentially, the Get a Life, about the conventions. So Creation really loves that.
So huge special thanks to them, and we really appreciate them as fans, as podcasters, and as documentary filmmakers as well. They seem to be a company that's of the people and for the people. What were you going to say, Sirach?
No, I was. I just wanted to just commend you guys again, because, like I said, the little bitty notes, the whole, Roddenberry suggesting the Captain Hornblower book, and those kinds of insights. Even the fact that Patrick Stewart was doing something completely different, and his voice was overheard in the hallways. And I always think about how these random kind of things lead to people being placed in certain positions, but it usually happens like that. And I'm pretty sure somebody saw Avery Brooks performing Paul Robeson somewhere, and that lit the light bulb for somebody. So I'm very fascinated to hear about the origin stories for these kinds of things. The long list of people that they could have went with, and and the adamant how adamant Gene Roddenberry was about not having a bald Englishman play his captain.
Yeah,
just those great moments.
I knew I had seen Patrick Stewart before Star Trek, but he was in I, Claudius. He was in a small part in I, Claudius, but I remember I loved that when I was a kid. Go figure. But it was a great miniseries on Masterpiece Theater on PBS. And then he was in the Dune. He was in the first Dune film that David Lynch directed, but it was, and I was a big fan of Dune, but that was not a great film. But I have a personal connection to it. My great uncle Henry was a professor at UCLA in the theater department, and he knew Patrick. Then they were colleagues, fellow professors working together at UCLA. So Patrick was there doing like on a sabbatical from the UK.
Well, he started at my university.
Right.
I was the first. Santa Clara University was the first place he came to teach on his sabbatical. So I had a week-long class with he and the 4 people that came over from RADA, which was amazing. So that's why I wanted that job, just so I could see Patrick again. That was so weird. Yeah. Hey, so it's the same time that your uncle would have been working with him, Joe.
Yeah. Yeah, they were all. You were all in the UC system.
Yeah.
And there was another Harold Gould that if you know from the Sting. He was He was also a professor in the UC system. I think he was at UC Riverside, and he was a good friend of my uncle. I think they were all palled around.
Didn't George Takei know your uncle too?
Yeah, he was a student of Henry's in after Star Trek, I think, in the early 70s.
Wow.
He went back to school and did my uncle, great uncle, directed him.
Hey, Dave.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, looking back now, almost 10 years on this documentary, was there an aspect of what you had to squeeze into the 58 minutes that you really had to fight for, and you because you're cutting out things, you're condensing things, but was there something above all else that you said this is untouchable? We're not shaving any part off. We're not going to lose this. That you're looking back at now that you're happy that you fought for.
Probably that we were persistent with Patrick Stewart. Again, having been turned down, and then Bill having the foresight to pick up the phone and call him and say, "This is what John Pike just said about you."
Brilliant.
And so I definitely, Joe knows, I fought for. We were late in the process. Joe, how late was that?
We were pretty much wrapping up the film, and then we got that interview, and it was, oh wow, we I forget what we threw away, because we had to throw away stuff. We have that. Yeah, I mean, just the back and forth between Pike and Patrick about, Pike tells that story about how he humiliated Patrick, and Patrick's response, I don't remember that, but I remember this. That's got to be, at least 6 minutes, 7 minutes of stuff. And then Patrick, and then the toupee story, all that stuff came so late in the process.
Wow.
I forget. I mean, I feel like we had a little more breadth in it, but that was probably why it got so tight, especially that first 20 minutes, is because now we had to fit that stuff in there, and we wanted to, because
Patrick talked about so much. When he said he was only going to tell me one story, it became
the only real big thing I ever remember, it wasn't a big thing, but it was amongst Kevin, Dave, and myself, is when there's a story about how Gene says that he was friends with
L. Ron Hubbard.
L. Ron Hubbard. He could have had his own church. And
I wanted that in there. I insisted.
Well, and I came up with the mock-up of the Sistine Chapel, God as Gene, giving man,
they're like, no.
And Kevin got really upset and thought we were being sacrilegious. And we had a pretty good argument about it. And I went on the internet and I showed him so many versions of that idea, like one with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and, and their handler and stuff. So that was like the only really big thing. But,
Joe, talk about the language issues with our animators.
Oh yeah. So Aurelian, who was the lead animator, he was in Romania, and that was probably the first time I really started to produce things, because I had always been an editor before. And so now I'm trying to convey all the ideas that Dave, Kevin, and I talked about that we wanted to have animated or illustrated. And the one thing that I found who didn't translate very much was comedy, across the language divide. And I was trying to, I came up with the idea. I said, look, Maury's the one who's firing everybody, and he's yelling at people, but he's really doing it at Gene's behest. So I want you to, put a picture of Gene smiling on the wall, so that above Hurley, so that psychologically that it's really coming from Gene, but he's the nice guy and this is the bad cop. And the guy goes, oh, like Stalin. you know, the picture like Stalin, and I was just like, oh, I don't know, you know, there's that Woody Allen,
kind of.
yeah, yeah, you know, there's that Woody Allen movie where Alan Alda goes, you know, if it bends, it's funny. If it breaks, it's not. And that was kind of what we were dealing with that.
It just worked so well. I thought you guys did fantastic. I couldn't peel away from it. I got a call in the middle, and I was like, I'm busy. I will say,
you know, Ciroc, Bill did say this to me several times. He said he thinks it's one of the best things he's ever done, and I think he's right.
Wow.
Yeah.
Because one thing we've left out of this
see
is
his curiosity. You can see he's curious, and he wants to know the answer to these things. And even the fact that he uses this poker metaphor with John Pike about, you know, playing poker with Gene and poker with Patrick Stewart, and he mentions that a few times, but really, William Shatner plays poker with Patrick Stewart to get him to do the documentary.
Yeah, he does.
Yeah, it was
and we also would Joe and I would regularly go to Bill's office.
Yeah,
and he would watch rough cuts, so he was hands-on in editorial as well.
My first meeting with Bill was at Creation in 2012 when we were set up in that room and we were doing all those interviews. And I hadn't met him yet, but I'd been editing on the other projects, and I didn't know that I was being talked about by Dave and with Bill about editing and stuff. And my first meeting with Bill is he walked in with his suitcase. You know, he came through a back way into the room, and he talks to Dave and Kevin, and he comes over to me and goes, Joe, so good to meet you. So what I'm thinking is country music, you know, chicken picking, and I'm just sitting there going, what the hell is he talking about? I just shut up. I was like, okay. And then we did our interviews all day, and then at the end of the day, I go, Dave, what is he talking about? He's talking about this movie we're gonna make, Chaos. I was like, oh, okay, good.
Right.
So, and then I went and I found a bunch of country fast music, and that was kind of what we used as our template and our pace.
Mm-hmm.
And then we had to rescore it at the end.
By the way, when Captain Kirk shows up with a briefcase and tells you to do something, you say yes.
Yes.
I just didn't know what context we were talking about.
Just say yes.
And I've had I've had a few conversations with him over the years where he just starts telling me something, and I go, okay, I think this is something new that we're doing.
Well, you know what? One thing you capture very well is also the conflict, because without conflict, there's no chaos. There's got to be conflict. Mm-hmm. You bring conflict right away. You talk about the conflict with kind of Encounter at Farpoint and how DC Fontana says she wrote it, and Gene's like, no, well, I kind of rewrote it. And so there's always this conflict that underlies the whole thing. And I think that's one of the, you know, great attributes to bringing out the chaos, the feeling of chaos, because you can see there's a butting of heads here, there's a butting of heads there, and you do a very good job of explaining how those kinds of conflicts arise. Maurice Early, you know, and the whole Tahiti trip with, you know, just I'll
buy you the ticket. I love that.
It was just great, and you know, you guys have really put down a great blueprint for making documentaries. Credit to you, David and John, and you guys are just like Joe. I mean, you guys are just amazing, and I think this is one that people have to watch if they're going to watch The Next Generation in order to get a good understanding of like what was the vibe at that time. Because I remember watching this now first 2 seasons, thinking, okay. Code of Honor. There's so many moments where you're like, what are they thinking, and what's going on here?
Yeah, and characters being introduced that you think Dr. Salar introduced as a character that's going to be recurring doesn't come back. Sonia Gomez introduced as a recurring character doesn't come back, and we're like just befuddled watching this, right, Ciroc?
Yes, and this answers a lot of those questions now. So for me now, I can say, okay. This is why scripts didn't. For example, I thought a great line that John Pike gave was, "Hey, we're watching this screening for Encounter at Farpoint." He's like, "What are these jellyfish?" And there's no ending to the story. And that's what I was thinking. I was like,
doesn't really end.
I was thinking, we thought
what
the
I
same
really
thing.
wanted to get in there is I remember watching it in college at first run, and you look at Q and it's like, that's Trelane from the original series. I mean, really, you could tell Gene just really rehashed that Trelane character.
And our pal John Delancey mentions something similar to that as well in an interview with us. But we only have you for another minute here, guys. So I do want to reiterate that everybody, you can get this documentary shoutfactory.com. Oh, I've got to pull this up. First of all, you said that there was a fellow from Romania named Aurelian.
Aurelian Scarabote.
Which is pretty interesting because you're cool when Star Trek names an alien after you. If you remember the Aurelians. And also, the Captain's collection that you can get at Shout Factory. Check out all of these bonus features. This is insane. Look at all this. So, Making of the Captain's trailer. It's 5 discs, still kicking. Shatner the firefighter, still kicking trailer, Chaos on the Bridge trailer, Shatner and the fans, and then tons of extended interviews. Walter Koenig, that we all know and love,
and
Grace
including
Lee
the first documentary I did with Bill, William Shatner's Gonzo Ballet, which won awards. Yeah, right there.
Amazing. Okay, so everybody go check that out. Watch the documentary. It's going to be the most exciting and intense 58 minutes of your life, possibly.
Plus, we also have the Voyager documentary coming out soon, right? That's something that's in the works. You also mentioned earlier on that the Michael Westmore documentary, something we could be looking forward to. So I just want to see more and more of you guys telling these stories because the insight is there, the access is there, obviously. And credit again to William Shatner for just showing the true level of professionalism, the passion, and, unraveling this story and, just giving some great interviews. So kudos to all of you guys at 455 Films. I think, you really mastered the art of this storytelling in this
Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
We're working on it.
Great. So thank you to Dave, thank you to Joe and Lolita. Everybody stick around. We've got more coverage of this glorious documentary in the first 2 seasons of Star Trek The Next Generation. I didn't mention glorious when I said Next Generation. I mentioned glorious only with the documentary. Lots of chaos there, but stick around, everybody. We will be right back.
We want to thank you too. Thank you to both of you.
Yeah, thank you.
Right. Thank you so much.
We'll be right back on The Seventh Rule. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to The Seventh Rule with Cirroc Lofton.
Hello.
And our coverage of the glorious 455 Films documentary, Chaos on the Bridge. Melissa Longo is here, everybody.
Hello.
We are also joined by our executive producer, to know him is to love him, Jason Oken. So this is going to be really cool. I can't tell you, Jason, how many times I thought of you when watching this documentary, because I'm like, oh, that's a Jason moment. That's a Jason moment. Because a lot of times you're throwing knowledge about these people that I've never heard their names, but you say it so matter-of-factly that I'm like, I feel like I should know these people's names, but now I do. Was this your first time watching this documentary? And if so, what was your just initial impression of it? Did you dive in like, oh, this is my kind of documentary?
Well, in some ways, I've seen it years ago. I haven't seen it in many years until earlier today, and I think at some level, like any documentary, it does sort of touch the surface, and you do get a lot of more honest opinions than you would otherwise, and maybe they're not as honest as they could have been or should have been, frankly, but you do hear a lot more than you do otherwise. And you certainly do get a feel for a lot of the players involved. And it's very interesting to see that what's lurking beneath the surface, where you have not just the writers themselves, but certainly I think Leonard Maislish is one of the more hidden players in all all of this, and there's certainly a lot more to it. And to be perfectly honest, I was a little surprised that David Gerald actually even wanted to be a part of this, just
Why
because
is
of
that?
how slighted I think he was. From what I
Hmm.
understand, he may have written pretty much the Bible for Next Gen. And he was basically pushed out, and he certainly, at least as far as I know, has been pretty bitter about it, and we didn't really talk all that much about it. And yeah, it's interesting that he participated in this. I mean, I guess this was done over 10 years ago, about 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So things may have changed over time. People do change their opinions, but it was certainly a little refreshing to see this. And again, a lot happened in those 2.5 years. It's hard to fit that in an hour's documentary, but it really is. I mean, if you don't know that much about what happened, I think it's sort of a good gateway type of thing to kind of see and understand how exactly Next Gen came to be and why perhaps the first 2 years weren't exactly the same as the next 5, and why the show took a little while longer maybe than it should have to find its footing.
Yeah. You know, another thing that kind of jumped out at me though was that because there was so much inconsistency kind of behind the scenes with the writers, it made me kind of re-examine how the directors approached each episode, because there must have been, I mean, if there's no consistency on the writer side, then it's hard to give instructions to the directors. And it actually gave me kind of more of appreciation for how Rob Bowman was able to, you know, string together a consistent kind of through line in his perception of what was going on.
No, that's a very good point, and interesting enough because so many cooks being there in the kitchen, who exactly was in the prep meetings, who was giving any sort of guidance to these directors as to what to do, especially at the very beginning. It's a very good point, and to see kind of you can certainly if you watch the episodes, you can see some directors sort of getting a lot more out of everything that they were given because they were pretty much on the same footing everybody was. But if you look at the episodes, some are obviously looking much, much better than others, and it's frankly a credit to Rob Bowman among them to be able to do something with what they had.
Jason, favorite directors of the first 2 seasons?
Probably Rob Bowman is the one that who stands out the most to me, and it's kind of a pity that he basically didn't really do anything much afterwards. I don't remember exactly when he stopped working on Next Gen, but some others came in, but he certainly stands out in my mind.
Now, Melissa, this is, I believe, the first time you've seen this documentary, like myself, like Sirach. What was your overall impression upon viewing it? Were you thinking, "Oh, this documentary is pretty chill"?
It was pretty eye-opening. It was, because I was not aware of a lot of the stuff that was going on behind the scenes, and I didn't realize just how much chaos there was. And it's interesting to see each person's interview and each person's take and perspective, because it just, I think a lot of productions you don't really get to see what goes into making something happen, and everyone has their own ideas and everyone has their own egos that they're fighting with, and everyone has their own life experiences that are driving them to do one thing versus another thing. And I think it's interesting that this documentary touches on that a lot, and maybe not diving as deep into the questions, but certainly how the interviewees respond to the questions that they are being asked, like the differences between John Pike's, I believe that's his name, John Pike's recollection of his dealings with Patrick Stewart versus Patrick Stewart's recollections of him dealing with it. And I think that has a lot to say, as take people's perspectives with a grain of salt, because the truth is somewhere in the middle. It's probably somewhere, in that gray area.
Mm-hmm.
So it was eye-opening. I liked it. I enjoyed it.
One of the takeaways that kind of shocked me was this kind of chess game that John Pike was playing with Gene Roddenberry in the beginning of this. This whole I need a 2-hour pilot versus a 1-hour pilot, and this whole kind of chess game about what one person wants, what the other person wants. But particularly with the fact where John Pike had positioned himself into a corner where he couldn't really give notes on Encounter and Farpoint because he was stuck with whatever he would get because he demanded that it be a 2 hours.
Yeah, that was nuts.
And so I thought that was interesting, an interesting position to be in, where the thing that you're asking for now you cannot critique because you've forced the other guy's hand. So do you think that that helped or hurt the final result of what we did see in the pilot episode? Jason.
That's a stumper.
You can look at it two different ways. I mean, if you look at the pilot, certainly it seems like two different stories being, kind of strung together. I mean, the original story that DC Fontana came up with is interesting, but I'm not sure. It certainly introduces the crew, but I'm not sure it's that capturing of a story, and we would have lost Q had it not happened.
Mm.
So
totally.
There's a positive that came out of this. Is it a great episode? No. Did Judd Pike really understand it? Probably not, but he may not have understood Star Trek in the first place. So, I mean, there was certainly an ending to it. Whether you liked it or not, there was a story and there was an ending. But it kind of shows you that perhaps, the sort of word that the studios didn't quite understand or get Star Trek. And, a lot of people didn't get it.
Mm-hmm.
That they were asking, they wanted a show, but I'm not sure they understood what they were asking for, what they wanted in the first place. So in the end, I think it worked out that the pilot was 2 hours simply, 90 minutes, if you will, simply because we got this, the Q character, because otherwise we may never have had him. So that if there's anything to take away from that, that'd be it. I mean, it's not the greatest pilot for sure, but again, it gave us Q.
Yeah.
Well, and I also think it gave us Star Trek: The Next Generation. It was, whether it was a good episode or not, it was the launching pad for a series that lasted 7 seasons. So, I think it was probably a good idea that he did play hardball with Gene, and then also it kept Gene in the loop, which I think was an important thing because of all of the backlash you were getting from Star Trek fans about it not having Spock and not having Kirk and not having that trifecta of the 3 main leads that Star Trek fans had come to know and love. And without Gene's name attached to that, I think that Star Trek would have fizzled out probably in the first season.
Mm-hmm. And I totally agree with that. It's the pre-existing franchise thing where if this was generic space show number 47, then would this have really lasted beyond 1 season? It's highly doubtful. Now, of course, there are some problems inherent in it because it was a pre-existing franchise, which was Gene Roddenberry wanting this, CBS Paramount wanting that. But it was also interesting. Look, Jason, you said, look, it brought us Q. But I don't remember who it was that mentioned it in the documentary, but they said those first 2 seasons, they were hectic, they were chaotic, they weren't the best, but they brought us Q, they brought us the Borg, they brought us the holodeck. Those are 3 very cornerstone type situations within Star Trek today. Q is still popping up in Star Trek, in new series. The holodeck is in every series. The Borg, God love them, they just keep coming back, no matter whether we want them or not. So there were still a lot of great things that happened in those first 2 seasons because, there were great ideas. It was just the execution that just was all over the map.
Yeah. And that's because there were so many cooks in the kitchen.
Yeah.
It's hard to tell who was controlling what at what point. And at some level, I think if they did sell it to Fox, we wouldn't have had Star Trek today. They would have canceled it probably very, very quickly, just because the ratings would have been poor. I think things happened that seemed probably bad at the time when they couldn't sell it to Fox. They couldn't get in the door at NBC. And CBS basically said it was a bad idea, whatever it was. It was just, I think the fact that they went to first run syndication saved it for us, because otherwise no network show would have been able to handle something like that.
Agreed.
Excuse me. You know what I thought was unusual? That this Leonard Maislish character, Gene's lawyer, who was doing all this spying and snooping, allegedly, to all the writers and whatnot, opening drawers. Could you have a more obvious spy than your lawyer? I mean,
that's been somehow banned from the lot and ends up back in there at some point.
Wouldn't you find somebody else to do the spy bidding for you besides the guy that everybody knows works for you? I thought that was interesting. Somebody. It just felt a little. It's like so obvious that he's reporting back, to Gene, and I thought that was hilarious. That everybody's like, Leonard, can I help you? And he's startled because he's digging through your desk. But I thought that was another. There's like, wow, this is the kind of chaos that's going on, right? Because you don't expect somebody snooping on you while you're at work. You're literally there to produce work for everybody, and it's not like it's a secret project outside of the people that are involved with it. So to have that kind of a spy around, is something that's going to be off-putting and definitely change. The air in the room is going to put tension in there and make it uncomfortable. So those were kinds of one of the things that jumped out to me. Like, wow, this was actually going on at work. I can only imagine if I go back to my trailer and somebody's like, Rick Berman's lawyer is like looking through my, my trailer drawer. I'm like, what are you doing here?
What are you doing here? Something tells me not much was able to control John Maislich, and I don't think even Gene Roddenberry could control John Maislich. It sounded like Leonard.
Yeah.
He was the third Leonard. I was like, how many Leonards are on this show? What is going on?
Sorry.
Yeah, but it seemed like with any good spy character, he was not just serving Gene Roddenberry. It seemed like there was more to it. Who knows if he was returning 99% of the truth back to Gene Roddenberry, or if he was giving his version of what he wanted. Was he rewriting things for himself or for Gene? It's all very muddy and gray there, but it certainly makes us look a little more closely.
Well, to me, it seemed like he had his own agenda, that he wanted to be a writer and that he wanted his scripts in there. And so he was going to find a way to get his voice heard in that writer's room.
Yeah, but he's not a writer, and they had to report him to the guild for violating terms of union laws. It's pretty amazing that this guy was able to continuously sneak onto the lot as well. I mean, usually when you're banned from Paramount, that's you're banned from Paramount, but the fact that he was able to still get on the lot in itself is a mystery.
Dig a tunnel?
I don't know, but I did like that. There was one moment also that I really enjoyed in this documentary was Patrick Stewart saying that he only remembered one planet name in the 70s
Yes.
on that show. He's like, only one planet I can remember. Only one thing jumps out to me, and that's
Yes.
Risa. And I just thought, wow, that's pretty. If you're going to make an impact with the captain, then that's the way to do it. And I think that was Ira's legacy there.
Yep.
Yeah.
I was like, Ira invented Risa. Awesome.
He invented a lot of. He's got some pretty good fingerprints in Next Generation. He also said that his favorite Risa was Basmati Risa. What do you think?
Oh gosh, here it is.
I thought I heard him say
that. Yeah. No, I didn't hear that. You know what I thought another interesting thing was, what I did hear Ira say was that making Patrick Stewart a Borg revealed more of his humanness, and I thought that is so. That's actually counterintuitive. So true, you would think, right? It's like making somebody a Borg shows more of their human side. You're like, I guess it does, because it shows a colder version of himself that's even less friendly and and more calculative. But
characters have to have flaws. They have to have depth. They have to have, and these are the kind of things apparently that we will be introduced to in the third season, is characters with depth, with flaws, with a third dimension to them outside of just, the perfect captain, the perfect first officer, the perfect doctor, like the perfect teenager. No teenager's that good.
Totally. And I'm excited to see Michael Pillar's influence in the third season and going forward, because I think, to me, he did bring that stability into the writer's room. That's what it appears to me, because ideas are great and ideals are great, but what matters most is the humanity of the people who bring us these ideas and ideals and how we get there. And none of us are perfect vessels, so it's more relatable to do it through character.
Yeah. I also enjoyed the whole rationale that Roddenberry gives to the studio execs when he says hair doesn't mean anything in the 24th century. I thought I thought if there's a way that you want to get your way in the show, that is the actual proper usage of using your knowledge of what the world building that you're doing to get your way. If you're going to get your way with the executives, you use that world that you built as the basis point for your argument. And I thought that's a brilliant way to debate somebody in this particular area. So that's kudos to Gene Roddenberry just for coming up with that as an idea, a way to manipulate the situation.
Hair today, gone tomorrow, he says.
Also was interested in hearing that they were considering casting a black man as the captain.
He was a final three.
He was in the final. So just that in itself, I thought was another bit of insight that, I thought lent a lot more from my understanding of what was going on. It was helpful for me to get a visual about the kind of people they were looking for. And I was surprised to see that, the black man was on that very short list.
Same. I was wondering what that might have made Star Trek look like, particularly Deep Space Nine, had Yaphet been cast.
That would have been pretty cool. And then Deep Space Nine, then it's like two black captains in a row. They got like a streak going.
But would they have had?
I don't think so.
They might have changed it up. You're right.
Yeah.
I think there wouldn't. Deep Space Nine wouldn't have been constructed in the way that it was had they went with Yaphet Kotto as the first captain. So I'm happy that they didn't, obviously.
And I think one of them was Mitchell Ryan. What I recognize him. Was that the guy that played Riker's dad? Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead,
one other point.
Jason.
I mean, they did say that they brought another actor to read with Patrick because they never wanted to bring a single person. I think they may have brought Stephen Mocht. I think that's the other guy that I kept hearing before all of this. He was on Deep Space at one point. He was in the trilogy at the beginning of the second season.
Yeah. He
the Bajoran terrorist trilogy. The Circle.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah,
I think I'd heard that as well, actually. Guys, we only have a minute left, so I want to be sure that we give a very special thanks to some very special people, and their names are Homer Frizzell, Dr. Anne-Marie Siegel, Eve England out in Wales, Yvette Blackman, Tom TJ, Jackson Bay out in Missouri, Bill Victor Arukin.
Arukin.
Our pal Titus Moeller, Dr. Mohammed Noor, Tierney C. Diekman, Anna Post, Anil O. Palat, Justine Norton Kurtzen, Joe Balsarati, Mike Gu, DQ, Dr. Stephanie Baker, Carrie Schwent, Faith Howell, Edward Foltz, My Live from Tokyo, The Matt Boardman, Chris McGee, Justin Weir, Jake Barrett, Jane Jorgensen, Henry Unger, Allison Leach Hyde, Julie Manisfee, Marcia Classic Schreier, Greg K. Wickstrom, Jed Thompson, and of course, Dr. Susan V. Gruner and Jason Oken. All right.